Ohranger's opening theme is Dash Ohranger, and as the theme song is lively, energetic, and pretty catchy as I found myself humming it at work. The song quickly glossing around the crisis, and taking advantage of the ole word pun for its secondary chorus. Otherwise, it's a pretty standard Sentai opening, only with more explosions!
Oh, I'm making a betting table on which director the comments will make derogatory comments about.
We open the series in the future! Yes, the far-off year of 1999!
Really?
Yeah, retconned. Before the show even ended. It occurs in 1995. This timestamping in the first episode was one of many signs of how Ohranger's trying to be like Jetman, since Jetman opened in 1990X, but by bad editing was then later revealed to be 1991. For very similar reasons, no one dignifies the 1999 thing past the beginning of the first episode, so it's just another citation of time being weird in Toei shows, especially if Sugimura wrote them. Apparently no one told Shout Factory, since that's part of their descriptive blurb about Ohranger.
Back on point. In the not-too-distant future,
Somewhere in time and space.
the Earth is under attack by killer robots.
Quick! Build a Deus Ex Machina that in no way solves the underlying conflict! I'm still pissed at Mass Effect 3!
Actually, I'm not that far off, but that's for later. This is the Baranoia Empire. They've been expanding and recently set their sights on Earth for conquest. They're led by Bacchus Wrath, his name pronounced as Bacchus Hund, his wife Hysterier, and Crown Prince Buldaunt, who lead the vast armadas that are also referred to as the Machine Beasts.
Why are they beasts? Well, all of the mechanoids have animal motifs. The foot soldiers, the bar troopers based on monkeys, their fighter craft on octopi, and the royal family on dogs.
Bacchus Hound, Hys Terrier, Bulldog Bulldaunt.
Name puns! Hell, even Buldaunt's future wife Multiwa fits this thematic, as she's named after a Maltese. Now that one's a bit more of a stretch.
But most of the creature themes are subtle enough to not overwhelm the more alien mechanical design nature of them. They creep in more later, but it at least keeps the thematic consistent, with the royal family being the top dogs.
And there's the punchline to the naming puns.
Their invasion, beginning a couple months before the series proper starts, has been destroying cities on a daily basis in Independence Day style.
Once again, Super Sentai doing something before a then still in production blockbuster movie.
In an effort to get the populace to surrender to be their slaves, because robots are superior, organics inferior, you will obey! Obey!
The why logic-driven robots would even want to make slaves out of an inefficient organic race is baffling, when even by their admission, robots need far less maintenance and upkeep. That's something you see from their characterization over the series.
Despite Box's declarations that robots are superior, has a hatred of emotions, and anything existing in its kind that is not perfect, to the point he will destroy and discard any robot that has imperfections instead of fixing and removing the faults in them, there are many signs that Bacchus possesses the same flaws he despises in others. He hates love and familiar relationships, and yet has a family, has emotional reactions to events, and despite his position and power, he is not built at all for combat like his subordinates. The cruelty he showcased towards all that over the show inferred to be from the inability to remove such flaws from himself. So he shall remove it from everything else. Only for that to, in reality, fail as well with his minions' defects.
And as is explained later, this invasion is more about achieving spiteful vengeance against the long-dead race that created him and his kind, originally to be pets, which again feeds into the beast theme of these machines having run wild, by conquering the world that was once their home. Yeah, we're dealing with precursor race crap too.
Which is introduced into the show alongside that of the story's lead characters, beginning with the Team Red, Captain of the United Air Force Overtech Hardware Division, Goro Hoshino.
Fun fact, Masaru Shishido would eventually open his own bar in Tachikawa called The Crystal Sky. The place is lined in Sentai and other Toku memorabilia, and is one of the places I wish to visit if I ever managed to put together a trip to Japan. Mostly so I can geek out.
as he meets up and learns of the other recruits for his special anti-paranoia team, which their chief officer... Wait, can it be?
Yes, it's Hiroshi Miyauchi!
Yes, Hiroshi Miyauchi, veteran Kamen Rider, member of both original Sentai teams, having appeared in numerous Tokusatsu series as either a star or guest actor. Sentai, Metal Hero, the Ishinomori Heroes, and Kamen Rider. If there is a triumvirate of Tokusatsu godhood, then strive to be Hiroshi Miyauchi.
Much like how Kenji Oba is Tokusatsu's answer to Chuck Norris, you don't mess with Miyauchi.
Here he's playing Chief Commander Naoyuki Miura, a scientist and archaeologist that's responsible for deciphering and constructing much of the tech of this series, and was also responsible for selecting the rest of the team, the other 4 members being shot down en route to the base. Whoops. And thus the first episode becomes one long chase scene, with Goro eventually deploying in a fighter jet modified with the tech Miura's uncovered, which allows, for the first time since Paranoia invaded, some of the enemy fighters to be shot down.
Yeah, another allusion to Jetman. What's amusing about these jets is, while Power Ranger Zeo wouldn't use them as part of their arsenal since they were so short-lived, they would be used as stock footage of military forces uncovering the Machine Empire's assault forces, and would end up being mentioned in one of the Zeo comics that guy with the hat reviewed years ago. Weird, isn't it?
Though the interim in this episode is, well, I've heard a lot of people call it lame, but there are more subtle moments of character going on with how the other 4, Shohei, Yuji, Juri, and Momo, deal with the endless pursuit by tireless robots and the obstacles they're herded into, showing Shohei as perceptive, Yuji resourceful, and Juri quick-witted, while also showing Momo as completely useless as she is the designated girl despite being part of the military's elite.
Though Hirohisa Soda, after he joined the staff, this being after the show was messed with, mind you, would more or less invert that and turn Yuji into the show's butt monkey, as Shota subbed him into the inexperienced screw-up role, despite that not being part of his character the rest of the time.
But thematically, the premiere also shows the desperate stakes the world is in right now through shrinking its focus down to them. These are supposed to be the best of the best, and they can barely take down one crazy killer animatronic, let alone spend 5 nights surrounded by them. Which all the more builds the contrast against when Goro arrives in his fighter, ejects down on an admittedly kick-ass bike, and goes to town on them as O-Red!
And of course, O-Red is a badass!
With the hunting party disabled, Goro brings the group in, where Miura explains his role, and how he's uncovered and reconstructed a power source used by an ancient race he believes can be used to counter the paranoia. This power created by using old relics from ancient cultures as a medium of power collection into another device, but there's one big problem with this exposition.
今から約6億年前、地球はカンブリア紀といってパンゲアという大陸が一つあるだけだった。もちろんその頃の地球には人間は存在していなかった。いや、そう思われていたんだ。素晴らしい文明を持った人類がな。
Yeah, about that, 600 million years ago? Pangaea didn't exist yet. It formed from the remains of a completely different supercontinent 300 million years ago. You know what else didn't exist 600 million years ago? The ability for any form of life to live outside of the ocean, as the atmosphere was still toxic to oxygen breathers, and there was no ozone layer to prevent solar radiation from burning anything on land to death. Even plant life wasn't on land yet to even support land animals.
And it's also nonsensical for supposed relics of that race to possess creature and people motifs when the ones they use would only come to exist in the last million years, and those artifacts otherwise originating and belonging to other historical cultures from the last few thousand years. In specific, obviously, the Incas, the Egyptians, and the Greek. Or how they've survived the eons with how much the world's physically changed since then. Between this, Zyuranger's ridiculous period for its backstory, the Gorma War in Die Ranger, and to an extent the Creation King's origins, I really get the idea that Noboru Sugimura either had no idea how time works, Onimusha 3 also supporting that take, or how ludicrous the periods he sets his series' backstory to occur in actually are.
Mind you, I do realize this is a show primarily intended to be watched by children, but this is an entry that was initially appealing to its older fans with the war plots, and these are things you learn in first grade. Or at least I learned them in first grade, that in story aren't being legitimized. You are not excused from writing stupid just because you are writing for kids.
And there's nothing that required this super ancient civilization to be set that far back. 10,000 or 60,000 years would have worked just as well. Hell, since they used ancient civilizations as the motifs this series, why not just call upon the myth of Atlantis to make this easier for you unifying all of these other elements? That would have fed into this series with these totems in fact inspiring later Earth civilizations' design elements that are literally impossible otherwise. Say what you will about Kyoryuger's ancient dinosaur war, it didn't actively conflict with historical stuff, but more expanded on events to explain away its existence that fit in with prior series that used dinosaurs, and common knowledge history.
Though I don't have issue with the pre-humans to ancient race thing in concept. I'm a sci-fi fan. We see that plot device explored all the time. It's just, the time period they set it back to is ludicrous for such a scenario, and there's no reason it needed to be. And the show doesn't bother explaining how that's possible as more than a hand-waved element, in a show that stresses the science fiction, and historical perspective, as opposed to the more magical elements of the prior Sugimura fantasy trilogy, where more people write that crap off.
This element, and things that inevitably tie to it, is my only significant gripe with the main storyline for the show, by the way. Really, of the episodes written by Sugimura this series, it's pretty much all I can call outright bullshit on. The rest just being things that needed more expansion to fully justify, or were obviously altered from their original premises. This comes up again when he expands on the lore of it, but he doesn't compound the error like was shown with Zouranger completely forgetting the team shouldn't know jack about the modern era when crafting the plots of the day. For at least it's consistent here.
Now, the other writers do that, but half of them didn't even seem to realize what show they were writing for. I'll get to that in the next video.
But yeah, he's created a pyramid-like power collector to take advantage of the energy field this super ancient race used, called Chouriki because it's just stupid to say super power, that he can endow everyone with using power storage crystals, also uncovered from ruins, with which to fight Paranoia with. For as revealed, they know nothing about Chouriki energy.
Except, the race that used Cherokee energy are the ones that created Bacchus and by proxy Paranoia. Meaning Bacchus should know how Cherokee energy works and just can't use it. Or they created Cherokee energy in response to Paranoia, they couldn't counter it, and were thus ejected. And the civilization still fell afterwards. But that doesn't work from what we learn Cherokee energy actually is.
This ends up being, once again, a citation of Sugimura not realizing his own failures as a writer, as his last-minute reveals of critical exposition are not really justified by the interim story. Spoilers! In the finale, it's revealed Chouriki energy is that of the human spirit and people's bonds. The device Mira made is simply a power collector that passively absorbs it from those living on the Earth, and conducts it into those endowed with the storage crystals and similar capacitors on the other devices UAO manufactures.
Now, the ancient civilization died out because of the robot apocalypse. Too many people died for the civilization to recover, meaning by that point at the end of the war, also informed by the uninhabitable state of the planet in that time period, most living things that would passively supply that energy would have been dead or not around. Thus, Paranoia should have won. They didn't. Bacchus was the only survivor, meaning there's also an incongruity in that as well, that could once more have been solved had this not been set so incomprehensibly long ago.
Though for all I know, that might have been something forcibly changed in the tail end since, well, it involves exposition about an alien girl that is by and far the single worst character in the series. But since Gokaiger would later define the Ohranger's greater power as the ability to unify the hearts of many into one, it would make more sense thematically, especially since when you're part of a war machine working to survive, many people do act as one to achieve victory.
And yet that barely happens in the series. The few that do showcase it, mostly part of stories possessing broken Aesops brought by their execution, as opposed to something Sugimura was allowed to develop. I'm supposed to be defending this show.
The four newbies get powered up, once more in a way that alludes to Jetman and its original Birdonic waves. And thus, with the next wave having deployed, it is time.
Chouriki Henshin!
I absolutely love this transformation sequence and the Ohranger suits themselves.
On top of the great color balance and the distinctive to this day shape of the helmets with the, shapes emblazoned on them, the chest and color line detailing breaks up and contrasts against the main body, both seeming as a circuit-like pattern to show the fusion of man and technology, but what also could be a bird's eye view of an ancient city, or even a labyrinth in which their greater power is hidden. I also love the team's weapons, which bar the expected Red Ranger wielding a sword, are a bit more esoteric than are usually seen. With the Mooks defeated, they tackle the giant Barra Saucer, and yeah, this is goofy, but understandable since they don't have their mechs yet.
Really, since I've seen how they did this in the 70s and 80s, it's a marked improvement and actually really effective integration in my opinion.
But by working together, they managed to fell the machine, first by hitting its weak points to disable it, and then by bringing them all together with their sidearms.
I love alliteration, and by proxy that gun. Sometimes I really wish I had lost all my Power Ranger toys from when I was young.
This leaves the royal family flummoxed that humans could actually achieve a win against their forces, ordering a temporary withdrawal to address their stratagems. After all, if they underestimated Earth this badly, who knows what else they might have? As the team powers down, they're shown to be completely exhausted. While they have great power now, it taxes their stamina to use it, meaning transforming should be done as naught but a last resort.
That rule ends up forgotten, though for all I know, it's after they adapted to the power.
But they're nonetheless elated at earning the first victory in this long war. For Bacchus will not stop until he shows the true perfection of synthetic life.
Despite the stuff with the super ancient civilization being just plain ridiculous with how far back it's set, this is an excellent and effective opening to the series.
While it doesn't give much time to character, it clearly establishes the situation and how outmatched they are against Paranoia, alongside how high the stakes are. And really, that's part of the problem with what comes later, and how their magnanimous war sheen will later reduce itself to the petty antics seen of Bandora, or the franchise's more small-time villains. At least in retrospect, that paradigm shift can come to be seen as understandable under the framework of these perfect robots, not knowing how to deal with straightforward defeat, so when more esoteric stratagems become required to try and obtain a victory, they go completely bonkers as logical AI aren't meant to be imaginative. Thus, through rampancy, any idea becomes seen as a good idea.
I think I've discussed enough insane artificial entities the last couple of years to be able to give them that leeway as a potential in-story reason for the later nonsense.
The pacing I don't think is overly fast, though they might have eaten their early budget on this massive setup, and so many location shoots may have shot themselves in the foot later, since, oh boy, do they recycle stock footage later. But the action scenes and choreography are all well presented, and bar the retconny things down the line, the setup is decently executed. While I love the suits, though, the normal attire for the group is a bit unusual. I seriously doubt Japanese military attire would involve skirts for women in field use gear, and overall they're not very utilitarian, nor appear to have supplies that might be useful in delaying their need to transform until it's necessary. As for Miura, many have questioned why he spends the series effectively in a school uniform.
The answer being when Hiroshi Miyuchi was playing another military organization role, Shunsuke Masaki in the Male Hero series Winspector, Soul Parade, and Exodraft, they accidentally recycled a Nazi uniform from a different period piece story as his original outfits. He was seriously a Charlie Chaplin mustache away from looking like a Japanese Hitler. I get the idea that they didn't want to repeat that, since Miyuchi was in several shows whose villains were Nazi allegory, so went with a more casual costume for him this time.
But the first 2 episodes are not the end of the opening arc. For as the next wave comes, Bulldaunt, showing he's the schemer of the 3, sends in the infiltrator Bara Vanish to track down a boy named Kenichi, whose research has determined knows the secret of Chouriki power.
Now initially I thought this was just a stupid way to include a kid in the story, and it is, as it's obvious the paranoia wouldn't be that foolish, and then they cracked the pseudoscience on us.
See, the kid really does not know anything, but as is shown with his rock collecting...
And next you'll be telling me water is a living organism.
Anyways, he and his father picked up a stone that turned out to be an artifact, which proved vital in Miura's research that eventually allowed him to recreate the Chouriki generator, and Vanish has equipment installed in it that will allow it to rip the memories onto floppy drives.
Hey now, don't copy that floppy! Obligatory 90s catchphrases. God, I'm old!
For Box to then decipher a way to use it themselves from the details they can glean.
記憶というのは忘れたと思っても実は頭の中に鮮明に残っていて催眠術で呼び戻すことができるというのを聞いたことがある。
So, does that mean you guys are susceptible to logical paradoxes?
As said, this idea is hindered because he should already know what this power is, since it was made by the same people, but 1, that was a later retcon, and 2, he doesn't know this is Chouriki energy.
Though he probably should, since it's later shown the transformation braces were perfect recreations of those used by that old civilization. Retcons.
Goro manages to keep Kenichi away from Vanish despite its disappearing tricks, but enough time evading it eventually makes Goro notice the trick. It can only become invisible while in the light, which allows them to get the upper hand, thus making Paranoia lose its chance at the knowledge.
Or they could build another of those units or its interface, since it's a robot you made on an assembly line. Pah! What are the odds of that happening? Awkward.
Bulldaunt then suggests they limit their activities to Japan, since they're having difficulties on that front, following the same fallacy that'd be seen by Venjix in 2009. Though there is a logic to it, as if they focus on the Ohranger and get rid of them, then the rest of the world should be cake. Again, following the fallacy of Venjix in 2009. So they send down Barra Crusher to begin up, only for the Ohranger to immediately detect it and track it down.
They're military! Public ordinance in emergencies such that would require the deployment like this would not apply! Wait, the show is actually acknowledging that? What year is it?
Yeah, this bratty kid, much like one of the kids from an awful Zoolander episode, is trying to get their dad glory within their profession, and doesn't understand jack about the rigors nor duties of their actual job. As such, when the Ohranger confront Crusher, the brat's idiocy of dragging his dad towards the danger leads to the man getting his arm mangled in the line of duty. Crusher's destroyed. However, as night falls...
I don't know whether to laugh or scream. This is what happens if you choose the synthesis ending, Shepard!
Yeah, no, like my criticisms of the worst of the ME3 endings, the human body doesn't have enough metal in it to permit it to be cyberformed without some form of external influence on it. Best guess is this being caused by some form of nanite injected into him, which I guess somehow turns him into a cyborg werebeast.
金属アメーバこのアメーバを有機生命体の中に入れるとすごい速さで増殖成長しその生命体の組織も全て金属に変えてしまう。
I try to give you the benefit of the doubt in this plot, and you had to go and disappoint me.
This is sadly what Miura does for most of the show, by the way. Justify the insanity as outreaches of science, when in fact most of what he says is complete bullshit.
And as a sci-fi fan, That's usually where we draw the line on the technobabbly crap. You have to in some way be close to something working that way to build a foundation of your premise. Otherwise, it's just magic in another form. And we really should not see robots using magic. Oh dear.
Well, this isn't the only were-crusher that's been made. The first convert abducting others so they can be infected with these worms into more mechanical human thralls.
And again, 2009, Vengeance did this plot a whole lot better.
Though to do this, they kidnap a bunch of kids so they can be stuffed into these butts, meaning, congratulations! Welcome once again to the true origins of Fazbear Entertainment.
So, would this make Police Dead Springtrap or Ennard?
But the problem with that is their justification. Kids' bodies being more malleable, so they'd be more adaptive to the change. But in turn, they have less mass with which to convert into more crushers by the show's own logic of how the transmutation works, meaning they are terrible subjects for this process, as it requires more resources and energy to trigger a full conversion of them. And this is shown with Police Dad, as any weakening of the Crusher's constitution permits him to change back, and that would only be worse with the host kids. Though when Police Dad does change back, he points his own gun to his head in hopes of preventing himself from ever hurting his son as a monster.
Why is this not the show we got for most of the series?
Nah, he's fine. Goro prevents the cop from committing, suicide by cop, and noticing Barracrosher's fear of fire, they manage to get the parasite to leave him. Though episode 5 does more follow the idea of nanites infecting and altering their victims, when Bara Cactus, a cactus is not an animal, releases what seems to be microscopic spores which cause people to begin eating machines in order to integrate their functions into themselves.
Now, visually, this one is pretty idiotic in its presentation, as many of the eaten items are not machines. One person eats a fire extinguisher, and a fire extinguisher just has a valve that keeps pressurized gas, water, or foam from escaping it. And, to make it worse, they're eating the canister. That is not the mechanical part of it. A lot of this stuff is just too simple to qualify as is described, nor the components that make them up survive post-mastication.
Now them eating such so they could integrate the parts into themselves so the victims would become more mechanical and mimic the function of those devices, that actually fits better, though not what's said to happen, and turns the standing populace into a standing infiltrator army. Again, Vengeance 2009, as the more machines they integrate, the less human they become, and the more they are controlled by paranoia. The ones being affected by this the episode chooses to focus on is a pair of brothers, the younger of the two eating a stove so he can breathe fire. This would actually be intimidating if this were a fucking teenager.
Because I'm one of those people that expect children to have evil crap come out of their mouths.
Yuji is present for Cactus's original infecting of people, only when he reports this for his statements to be outright dismissed. Why?
Because Toshiki Inoue wrote the episode. Yeah, he wrote a few stories before getting the boot, but I'll give him credit for actually wanting to explore the character dynamics for the main group, even with it being subverted by unnecessarily included children.
Worse, there are two of them, so the Ohranger not even bothering to check or go with Yuji. It shows their teamwork and interpersonal relations have a long way to go, as do the Paranoia forces since the two cacti begin quarreling, which forces them back to Paranoia's base on the moon.
Then why did you install such in them in the first place? You're robots! They don't come standard!
Nonetheless, he uses those emotions against the cacti, threatening one with destruction to motivate the other to do their job right, which leads to the older brother of one sibling pair with his younger brother with a gun against his head, to make the younger brother of the other sibling pair to install a gun in his hand.
Okay, this is uncomfortable, since I live in a country where it seems impossible to actually enact gun control laws.
Still, the other older brother manages to connect to his sibling and restores his humanity, with the Ohranger then managing to take down the cactus. Next, Baka summons Psycho Shocker Jinzo in attack mode, so he can use his psychic powers.
He's a robot! He shouldn't have any! And yes, this is a recurring problem in the show.
To try and divine a connection to Miura, so they can pick his brain on Chouriki technology, which only manages to work thanks to Miura having been working himself half to death to prepare more of the team's arsenal. Specifically, the team's Mecha, the Chouriki mobiles, of which he's overseen every part of their construction, as there is no one else that can complete them.
Remember this point.
But the breakdown of his mental defenses allows okay, alright, the robot's name is Bara Brain, to get one key element of the man's character, the person he cares the most about, a little girl named Miko.
Curse you, Spider-Man! Your attraction to children rubbed off on Hiroshi Miyauchi.
Actually, no. Him hallucinating the girl causes him to reveal that Miko is the daughter of a friend of his who's dead. When they were returning from an assignment with Miko present, their car overturned, both him and Miko hanging off a cliff, and only Miura's grip on the pair preventing them from falling to their deaths. Miura blames himself for his friend dying, as if he'd been stronger, he could have pulled them both up to safety, but instead his friend, in full view of his daughter, chose to let go so his daughter could live, and Miura's been her guardian ever since. That failure haunts him, and is why Miura drives himself so hard in his duties, in honor of the friend he couldn't save. And he's going to do everything he can to secure a safe world for Miko to live in.
Fantastic acting by Miyauchi on this one, by the way. But thanks to the mind skimming, he's put a target on Mikio's back.
Which Bara Brain masterfully uses, abducting the girl and using her body,
Not like that.
as a puppet to lure out Miura, planning to have her kill him with her new psychic powers.
I'm having Black RX flashbacks.
All the while using her condemning of him to break his will.
オーレンジャーは地球を守り、人々の命を守るのが仕事なのに、本当はおじさま、人の命がどうなろうと平気だったのね。お父様が死んだ時だって、本当はわざと手を離したんだわ。
違う。私は二人とも助けたかった。しかしどうすることもできなかったんだ。
嘘。お父様はおじさまを恨んでるわ。
I was actually so wrapped up in the moment with this, I initially thought that was the girl's actual thoughts, and not Bara Brain's manipulation. It's that well written a scene and build up to it.
Miura, however, is smarter than me, in this case, and saw right through it, while he buys time for rescue.
どうしたらいいの？参謀長も連れ去られ、あのマシン銃にも勝てないなんて。
Shut up, Momo! You might not have an idea to what to do, but you screaming about it isn't helping as you're doing that instead of finding something that can.
Such as Yuji reveals, two of the team's machines are actually ready to deploy. Exterminate! Exterminate! Why is a Dalek being pulled by a Sphinx? They fight off a fighter contingent as the others rescue Miura and Miko from Brain's clutches. Miura then, well, doing the stupid thing, though at least in this case it can be implied that Brain ripped open an old wound so he's not thinking straight. See, he tries to make himself a lure so the others can get Miko away, when he didn't need to as they were already outpacing Paranoia until they stopped to argue over this, which allowed them to catch up. They need Miura back to finish the mechs to fight off the current invasion. They established this in the episode already, with Miura's round-the-clock work on them that they can't do that without him. But the episode now goes, nah, Miura doesn't need to work himself half to death. The technicians can do all of that.
Which is why we never see a single technician working on the mechs when the Ohranger pull up the blueprint to finish them themselves.
Oh, and yes, they actually did still need Miura, as even when they all reached the deployment stage, They're still incomplete, as only Miura has the final details to them in his head, when he is at the enemy's mercy. Well, the world is screwed. Deus Ex Machina no Jutsu! Yep, they just need to insert their Chouriki energy storage crystals into the mechs to endow them with the power to combine.
Form feet and legs. Form arms and body. And all form the head.
This is as good a time as any to address a certain question. What was so special about the Ohranger and by proxy Zeo toys that made their sales insane? And I can point to 2 key reasons for the robots and roleplay toys: limb articulation and modular design. The first relates to solely the robots. The way Bandai has always made combining robot toys is make them giant bricks with at best a rotating hinge at the shoulder, though even that is often just a combiner connection port.
Ohranger Robo, and later O-Blocker, however, were shown to have full range of motion in the arms due to a secondary elbow hinge necessitated by how the relevant mechs combined into the larger robot, which also left it in perfect proportion to the television one. At the time, no one really saw that from combiner robots. Even other companies like Takara's had the same limitations.
Now, I love combiner mechs, but even to this day, posability is not often seen outside of third-party productions or expensive remolds. So to see it in a common-line toy caught kid and collectors' attention, as the Ohranger and Zeo toys were ridiculously well-engineered.
The modular design thing, while also reflective of Ohranger Robo and how it had differing helmets to give the mech differing abilities, which increased not only play value but how you could display it, was more seen in the first group roleplay toy, of how their team combination gun could be created out of solely their individual weapon, or just pieces of them with their sidearms, or even hook up for intermediary and combination weapons. Again, something not very much seen in that era, where at best 2 sidearms would solely link up. You'd get the team cannon, or you'd need some other later released tertiary weapon. Design-wise, all of these were excellently crafted, and something Bandai would revisit and take inspiration from later, when modular toys would become more commonplace.
I can't even tell you how much the Zeo Megazord was my favorite Zordon-era mech as a kid, simply because of these factors. And both of these I see as why the Ohranger toy line was so initially successful before they binged on the later editions, as it was a paradigm shift that wouldn't be seen or capitalized on again until years later. Even to this day, you can count the number of Sentai Mecha toys with this kind of limb articulation on one hand. And this series has 2 of them.
Aesthetic-wise, all the mechs look excellent both apart and together. The Greek Bull, the Egyptian Sphinx, the Eastern Island Moai Head Dalek, the Japanese Jomon period Dogu Statue Dalek, and the Sky Phoenix of the Nazca lines, Nazca culture, and South America. And I always loved all the guns on the leg statues, which when I played with my toy version of the thing, I'd always keep deployed once combined on the outer sides, as who wouldn't want rocket boots? And of course, it has a kick-ass sword. And with this mech's debut, Baranoia's forces fall into a retreat, though they do not stay gone for long. Bach is taking this time to call in for reinforcements.
I also seem to be missing everything spelled with a J. All I see is misspelled words and wingdings.
They also decide to perform an upgrade to the court jester servants Kocha, the small one, and Acha, improving Acha's servos to make him more mobile, and Kocha gaining the tech to macro-sized mechanoids.
And this does seem like a natural progression to the conflict, as is just the next stage in the militant arm race of their threat escalation. Their fighters and carriers now have to deal with giant robots, so they'll make it so any member of their forces can become a giant robot!
Chicks dig giant robots.
Presented when the Ohranger take on Bara Missile after the robot launches missiles into Tokyo.
Yeah, you see how this would have been inappropriate following a terrorist attack? Hell, with Power Rangers Time Force, they ended up changing a few scenes post 9/11 for this exact reason. They made this episode before that happened, but it definitely had been in bad taste.
The Bar missile goes down easily in the small scale, but due to the Ohrangers' inexperience in piloting, they in turn are thrown for a loop once it's giant robot on giant robot, which was Bacchus' plan in the first place to overwhelm and disable them, so they could just kill them all outright by throwing them into the sun! This, however, is where they first introduced the head change gimmick of the mechs by Mira revealing this ability to them.
Wait, no, sorry. They already know about it, they just didn't use it until this exact moment, despite panicking about the crisis they're in, as if they had absolutely no way out of it. Hey, morons! You kind of show yourselves as incompetent if you act as if you're oblivious to the obvious solution to your plight. Worse, this puts the drama over the details, as there's no reason, if they knew about this system, for them to have been put in this situation.
Easy way out? That system not being operational before this point, so it wasn't thought of as an option. But again, that is not what is said in the episode. Thematically, the head change gimmick is appropriate, since it's a contrast between organics and synthetics. Organics are flexible and can adapt, whereas machines are for the most part made for one purpose, and is more difficult for them to change to suit another role or task they weren't designed for. Thus, while Barra Missile is more powerful, that versatility of Ohranger Robo gives it the edge.
It helped with the team thematic a bit and how each of them in turn takes command of the mech when they switch between the various helmets, which more showed their teamwork and unity in all this than previous piloting or future uses of the armor's change gimmick, where most of them just go to the Red Ranger by default when they could have been more passed around.
Still, that pretty much wraps the opening arc of the series. The heroes triumphant through their own skills, efforts, and the people backing them, with 8 solid tales that set the setting fantastically for this conflict, even with my gripes about the execution of the pre-human race backstory.
Sad to say, then, that while the shift is not immediate, it does start to go downhill from here. See you next video, where we discuss the movie.